Hello and welcome to this very class. This is our second class and we've been discussing the basics of photography, and in this class today we'll be looking at some important concepts in photography. And I'm your humble teacher, Philip Akoji. And a brief about myself: I'm a professional photographer based in the city of Abuja, Nigeria, and I'm a professional photographer with over 16 years of experience. I've trained several hundreds of students currently all over the country that are doing very well, and this very course is an attempt to reduce the stress of training students, so we don't really spend much time with beginner students, so we can actually dwell more with our master students. So if you haven't enrolled for our master classes, please ensure you enroll for our master classes so you can actually have more advanced experiences. But of course, this beginner training is very important for you if you're a beginner photographer, because in master classes we are building on the various concepts that we have established right in our beginner classes. The very first topic today is the camera. We're going to look at the camera and the various parts. One unique thing about many people is that they get cameras and never take time to look at the camera manual. So we'll be attempting to explore the various parts of the camera at the beginning of this very class today. And the very first thing we want to look at is the power switch. Different cameras have different power switches. Okay, for this very camera, this Nikon D3500, and the power switch is this very one. Number one, you slide it this way to on, and you slide it back to off it. The second point is our shutter button, shutter release button. This is the button which you press on to focus, and you press it, you half press it to focus, and you full press it to shoot. And the next button we have is our exposure compensation button, and that's this very button. The exposure compensation button helps to measure the level of exposure and compensate for it. It increases the level of exposure we have. The next button we have is the movie recording button, which you press to record your videos. The next we have is a live view switch. When you press this button, you'll be able to snap your photographs in live view. And the mode dial, we've discussed it in our previous class. This is the mode dial, and of course it is our number 6. Our number 7 button is the built-in flash. The number 7 is a built-in flash. Every camera, most cameras actually come with built-in flash. Some cameras don't. Some full-frame cameras don't come with built-in flashes, so you should take note of that. Number 8, we have the microphone. This is the microphone of the camera. Number 9 is the mounting mark. The mounting mark. Now this mark is going to be also on your lens. Okay, when you're mounting your lens, the mounting mark on the lens and on the camera body must be at the same, must align together for the lens to be able to go into the camera. If it doesn't align, it cannot go into the camera. Some are red, some are white, so it depends on the color your camera has. And then number 10 is our lens release button. Okay, lens release button. Now number 11 is our mirror. We mentioned this in our previous class. This is a mirror that flips open and closes. Okay, and that is what makes this camera a DSLR camera. When you press the shutter button, this mirror will go up, and the image you are focusing through this lens will get to the sensor. Okay, now the sensor is directly behind this mirror. So let's go forward. We have the lens mount, number 12. The lens mount. So this is where your lens is going to mount. When it goes into this, you're going to turn it, okay, in order to mount in and fit in, without shaking. You have number 13, which is our CPU contact. That is a contact of the lens. Okay, and we have number 14, which is the AF assist illuminator, the self timer lamp, and the red eye reduction lamp. Now this very lamp comes on when you're taking photographs and the place is not well illuminated, so that it can help assist. It also comes on when you're snapping a self timer picture, and also it comes on in a very dark place where there is a propensity to have red eye in the image in order to reduce that very effect. And then this number 15 is the body cap, the lens body cap. You use it to cover this very camera body. So the next series of we'll be looking at is number 16, and number 16 is our accessory shoe for optional flash units. Now if you have an external flash or you have a trigger, you fix your trigger or your external flash here. Number 17 is the command dial. This command dial, you use it to fit or address certain commands within your camera. We have the focus lock. Focus lock, number 18. You use it to lock up a particular focusing that you've actually achieved. Okay, we have information button, number 18. It gives you number 19, information button. It gives you the different info, on your camera. Number 20, we have the connector cover. Now there are different ports here, the HDMI, the USB. So this is a cover, and when you open it by using this very spot, you just flip it open. It opens, you will be able to see all those ports. We have the flash mode, number 21. You can change your various flash mode here, from TTL to several other flash mode, and it also the flash composition button. Now we have number 22. Number 22 is our eyelets for camera strap. Now you use this very spot, and the other one is around here to tie your camera strap. And number 23 is the speaker of the camera. And number 26 is the focal plane, the focal plane mark. Number 24, the focal plane mark. Okay, and number 25, we have the USB connector. Number 25, the USB connector. This is inside this. Okay, these two ports are inside this very place. So that's number 25, and number 26 is the HDMI connector, which is here. It's inside your camera. Now proceeding, we have number 27, which is the rubber eye cap. The rubber eye cap, which is the cap that is here. You can actually detach it. Is on top of the viewfinder. Number 28 is the viewfinder eyepiece. This is where you view through your lens. Of course, this is what I was explaining to you in our previous class. The light comes through into the lens, and then the mirror, we saw earlier, reflects the light, and then it comes through this viewfinder for you to see. That is what makes it a DSLR. So this is our viewfinder eyepiece. Number 29 is our diopter adjustment control. Now you use this to adjust your visibility, the clarity of what you see through the viewfinder. Now we have the playback button, number 30. Number 30 is the playback button. You use this button to play back the images or videos you've snapped. We have the menu button, number 31, that you use to go into the general menu settings of your camera. We have number 32, the I button, which is more like an info button. It gives you additional function. Number 32, it gives you additional function, so you want to learn more about that button. Number 33 is our OK button. This is the button right here. When you enter into your menu, you want to select OK at different points. You use that. We have the multi-selector button, number 34, the multi-selection button. You use it to select differently. Now you have this. So that's the multi-selection button. Now we have the release mode. The release mode, number 35. This is the release mode. And number 36, we have the memory card slot. Okay, this is our memory card slot. You slide it up, you open the memory card, and you slide it back, you close it. Okay, we have the memory card access lamp, number 37. That gives you, if it displays green, it means your memory card is good to go, and if it's blinking red, or as the case may be, other camera models might have different colors, so it might give you a danger or a warning sign that there's a challenge. Number 38 is our battery chamber cover latch. You press this backward to unlock your batteries, and you press it forward to lock up the battery. So you release it backward, you can open this. Okay, and then we have the battery chamber cover. That's number 39. This is the cover. Everything is the cover. Okay, and then we have number 40, which is our deleting button. You press this twice on a particular image that is displayed, you delete that very image. You press it once, it will ask you, do you want to delete? When you press the second time, it means you're confirming to delete the image that is selected. Now this is a thumbnail playback and help button, this very one. Okay, and then we have the playback and zoom button, and this is the button. You use it to playback or to zoom. And then we have the tripod socket. Now you use this to mount your camera on a tripod. And we have the monitor 44. This is our LCD, or the monitor, where we view our images. We also use it to view live view when we're shooting on a live view, and we also use it to view our menu and several other things. We have the battery latch, number 45, the battery latch, and of course it is the opened version of this. So when you open this, you're going to see it around here. Now you can use it to release the battery. You push it backward, it releases the battery, and once you put your battery, it has a spring. It will close or clamp the battery in place so it doesn't fall off even if the cover is open. And we have number 46, which is a power connector cover for optional power connections, and that's it. So you open this, and if you have any optional power connection, you connect it from there. The next we want to look at is the focal length. The focal length is the distance between the lens and the image sensor when the subject is in focus. This is usually stated in millimeters. Example, we have 20 millimeter, 50, 85, and 100, 200 millimeters, and what have you. Now the focal length is measured from within the camera, but it is expressed in real time, so you can see it, differently. And so let's go forward. We have metering. Metering describes the process how your camera decides to assign the right shutter speed and aperture based on the amount of light that the camera can pick. Now this is very effective when you're shooting on auto mode. The camera actually does the metering, and there are three types of metering, and these include the center weighted metering, we have the spot metering, and we have the matrix metering. And next we want to discuss is the image resolution. Every image has a particular resolution. So what is a resolution? Resolution is typically described in pixel per inch. This refers to how many pixels are displayed per inch of an image. Higher resolutions means that there are more pixels per inch, resulting to more pixel information and creating a higher quality crisp image. So that is it. That's a pixel per inch. Now bigger cameras actually have produce images with more resolutions. For example, full frame cameras usually will produce images with more resolution, more pixel per inch than crop frame cameras. Next we want to look at is depth of field versus bokeh. Now these two terminologies have been mixed, in photography. Many times you see or listen to a photographer and you say depth of field when he means bokeh effect, and he says bokeh effect when he means that depth of field. They are two different concepts, though they are related and very closely related, but they are not the same. So depth of field in a photograph, you see when there is an obvious focus area set against a blurred background or a foreground. Now that means depth of field is usually defined by the blurriness of a particular image with a particular subject, the blurriness of a background or a foreground with a subject that is absolutely in focus. When you have that, you have a depth of field. While bokeh, on the other hand, refers to how your camera lenses renders light that is seen within the parts of the image, of the blurred image. So how your camera renders light within the blurred image is the bokeh effect. Sometimes it can be soft or harsh circular shapes, or they look like hexagons depending on your lens design, your aperture settings, and lots more. Okay, now this is an image that have depth of field. We have the subject, which is this insect, and you can see it is in focus, and you can see the background is blur. Now this explains depth of field. However, this is bokeh effect. You see the light is giving different shapes here. This is more like a circle. This is more like a polygon. This is more like a hexagonal shape. You know, different shapes like that, but they are more circular. You know, as you can see, the light is forming this shape. So that is what the bokeh effect is. Alright, now the 4 factors that affect depth of field in an image would include: 1, the aperture. Wider aperture gives greater depth of field, and shallow aperture gives low depth of field. So if you want to have a very beautiful depth of field, you have to dial down your aperture to as low as possible. And most low light lenses also give very beautiful bokeh effects. For example, like the 50mm, Nikon 50mm or Canon 50mm low light lenses can also give you very beautiful bokeh effect, as well as beautiful depth of field. Another factor is the subject to camera distance. When the subject is closer to the camera and is farther away from the background, you will have a very beautiful depth of field. But when the subject is closer to the camera and is closer to the background, you will have you wouldn't have a very beautiful, you have a very shallow depth of field. Okay, and so lens and focal length. The lens also have an effect on depth of field. If you're using for example, I mentioned the low light 50mm lenses. They give a very beautiful depth of field. If you're using a telephoto lens, they also give beautiful depth of field. So we also have camera sensor sizes. Camera sensor sizes, for example, full frame camera sensor sizes give more depth of field than crop frame camera sensor sizes. The next thing we want to look at is the ISO. ISO is your camera sensitivity to light as it pertains to either film or digital sensor. A lower ISO value means less sensitivity to light, while a higher ISO value means more sensitivity to light. Now, one thing that is worthy of note is that when the ISO value is higher, you have more noise within the image. So it is advisable if you keep your ISO as low as possible. For example, if you can shoot as 50 ISO or 100 ISO, keep it that way and get beautiful pictures so that your pictures would not have too much noise. Okay, that's very important. We have the shutter speed. The shutter speed is the speed at which the shutter of your camera closes. It's the speed at which your camera captures an image. The shutter speed creates a shorter exposure. This means it affects the amount of light the camera takes in. Okay, because when you're shooting at a faster shutter speed, your exposure is very short. That means very little light comes in. When you're shooting at a slower shutter speed, your exposure actually takes a little more time and more light comes into your camera. What this means is that faster shutter speeds produce darker pictures and slower shutter speeds produce brighter pictures. A slow shutter speeds give the photographer a longer exposure and lets in more light into the camera, while the faster shutter speed gives the photographer a shorter exposure and lets light into the camera. Now, this is an image that illustrates the various effects of shutter speed as to the object's or subject's motion. So if you're shooting maybe a baby or a subject that is moving now, and you're shooting at 1:1000 speed, it will freeze the object or subject completely. Okay, when you're shooting at 1:500, it will freeze, but you might be able to witness a little motion effect around the edge. Okay, and that will continuously, become obvious the lower your shutter speed becomes. Now at 1:60, you can see it's more obvious, but it's not as obvious as it is for 1:30, and 1:15 the image will be blurred. Okay, maybe let's say for example this image, this subject is dancing. You can see now 1:8, it's very bad, okay, and 1:4, you're not even going to see the subject. You will just have an idea, but it's going to be out of focus. 1:2, it will be totally out of focus. And if you even go below this, where you're shooting at the bulb level or low light level, you would even get a more different effect. So use shutter speeds depending on what you intend to achieve. Okay, there are scenarios that might warrant you to shoot at this or even lower speeds than this, and there are scenarios that warrant you to shoot at these speeds. Okay, let's go forward. Functions of shutter speed. Now the shutter speed helps you to freeze subject motion. If you're snapping something that is moving very fast, you would want to freeze down motion so you get the object or subject in focus. And when you do that, you would need to shoot at a higher shutter speed. Now you also use shutter speed to control image exposure. Lower shutter speeds capture brighter images, while higher shutter speeds capture darker images. Capturing motion effects. With the right speed and technique, you can capture the energy of the moment instead of simply the visual details. Now when you're trying to capture maybe a moving vehicle, you can snap at a very good speed and move your camera along the moving vehicle, and you'll be able to get very beautiful motion blur. So the image is going to be a little more in focus, while the background will totally be out of focus. It will be in a very complete motion blur. Okay, now the next thing we want to look at is the aperture. The aperture is the hole in the lens that controls how much light gets into your camera. It is synonymous to the iris in a human eye, which controls the amount of light that comes into the human eye. So the aperture controls the amount of light that comes into the camera. Okay, so let's go. It means it is measured in f-stops, and it can be modified across several ranges. Low light lenses can go as low as 1.2 f-stops, and other lenses can go as low as 3.5, 3.7 or 4.0 f-stops, and it increases like that to f22 and all of that. So let's go forward. Aperture has a great effect on exposure, on depth of field, and bokeh effects. Okay, so when you want to have greater depth of field, try to shoot with the lowest aperture. When you want to have more bokeh effects, try to shoot also at the lowest aperture. When you want a brighter image, try to shoot at a lower aperture, and when you want a darker exposure, try to shoot at a higher aperture. Okay, now the next thing we want to look at is white balance. White balance is the temperature of a photograph. It is used to adjust the colors to match the color of the light source so that white objects appear white within your image. Subjects may be lit by a number of different light sources. This can be sunlight, it can be incandescent bulbs, it can be fluorescent light. Now, these different lights means different temperature for the image, but you can use your white balance to ensure that at every temperature you are able to ensure that the white color within that very image appears absolutely white. Okay, so there are various camera white balance settings, and the first we want to look at is the auto white balance. The auto white balance is the white balance settings where the camera actually adjusts the settings for you, and this is done with the data that the camera picks from the camera sensor. And there is a drawback to using the auto white balance. The drawback basically is that when you're shooting with auto white balance, you can shoot at a particular scene in the same scene, and your white balance can change sporadically. You can shoot at one particular spot and your camera changes up to 3-4 different white balances. As a professional photographer, you wouldn't want to make such blunders, because by the time you have different type of pictures at a particular setting, it's not going to be very good for you. So you want to consider that. Then there's a tungsten white balance. The color temperature is around 3200 K.
and so you want to use the tungsten at a particular scenario or time that is suitable for your work. Daylight or sunny white balance, the color temperature is around 5200 K, and this helps to balance the temperature at the daylight, so you can have white colors appearing white. The cloudy white balance shoots at 6000 K, and when you shoot at 6000 K, you'll be able to have that white appearing white under the cloudy environment. The shade white balance works like the flash settings, and the shades tends to warm up the scene to compensate for cooler blue tones. Okay, now these are usually higher, they usually have higher K values, which should be between 5000 to 6000 also. The flash color balance, the color temperature is usually around 6000 K, and this is also to ensure that white colors appear white. These settings, you have them all in your camera. You can just pick the specific white balance and test. The fluorescent white balance, the color temperature is around 4000 K, and it also ensures that when you're shooting within a fluorescent lighting setup, when your light source is fluorescent, it balances it and ensures that white objects appear white. Now, one of the things you would want to do is when you enter into a new environment and you've not set your camera yet, you might want to experiment. Bring out your camera, test different white balances, and see which works best for you. With practice, with mastery, you become very good, such that you can actually walk into any scene and you'll be able to know the right white balance for that very scene without necessarily testing. However, as a beginner, I will advise you to always test, and whenever you're short of ideas of what to do, just return back to the auto white balance and flow with it. Okay, and most of all, when you shoot in camera raw, you can always adjust your temperatures when you go back. Then the final setting is the custom white balance. The custom white balance is adjusted at the photographer's discretion. This is used by most professionals that have already mastered different white balances, and they know the kind of white balance that is best suited for every scenario. So they would always return back to, they'll fix it at their own discretion so that they can get specific or unique temperatures that they require for any setting. So shall we proceed? The next topic we have here is shooting in camera raw versus JPEG. Now, the raw images are more like digital negative, and these are images that have not been processed. They've not been adjusted by a camera or software. It contains all the data taken at the time of exposure. Examples of such data might include shadows, highlight, temperature, vibrance, and all details, all data that are available at the time of exposure. Okay, now it is very advisable for you to shoot in camera raw. This is because you can always manipulate the temperature and every other thing you want to manipulate. If you made mistakes, you can easily adjust some of the mistakes in camera raw. The next image we have here is the JPEG images. These are standard file formats that almost every device can easily accept and view them. Okay, you can also shoot in JPEG. However, these are compressed images. They are compressed images. It then means that there is little you can do to modify them and maintain, the originality. Finally, it is very advisable to always shoot in camera raw. And if you are caught between two opinions, you can set your cameras or to shoot both camera raw and JPEG. When you do that, you have both, and then you decide which one you want to go for. Now, with that, it will be the end of our class, and I will be giving you an assignment. The first is to explain in details the effects of the varying speed and aperture on the depth of field. So I want you to pick up your camera, go and experiment, change your settings to different speed and different aperture, and shoot different the same picture and see what the effects would look like. Thank you so much for your time, and I want to believe you are enjoying this very class. If you have any question, feel free to get back to me. I'll be available to attend to every question So thank you so much for your time. See you in our next class.